Hello and welcome to today's podcast. I'm Susan Guthrie, your host, and today, people, we are going to be uncovering buried treasure. We are going to go and do the deep dive in finding hidden and forgotten assets in divorce. This is the stuff where we're going to go find the money. And I brought back a special guest because Olivia Summerhill, financial expert and the founder of the Summerhill firm, came on a few months ago. You all heard and loved her episode on whether and how your standard of living during marriage impacts your divorce. And she mentioned that one of the things she really loves to do is go searching for those hidden assets. So I said, oh God, we're going to have you back. And here she is. So Olivia, thank you for joining us again.
Hi, thanks for having me. We always have so much fun. So today is not going to even be an exception. We're going to enjoy today's conversation.
And I always enjoy talking to you because you are just one of those people who has such a wonderful outlook. And that is, I will say, long time in this world of divorce, it's hard to find people with happy, demeanors and just a peaceful mindset in this world of finance and divorce. So it's always a pleasure talking with you. And I'm excited to talk about this because I know this is going to get people's attention.
Mm-hmm. And it should. It really, really should. Can I just throw out a disclaimer though?
Yes.
That even though you're listening to this today, wherever you are, you're on a walk with the dog, you're in the car with the kids, wherever you are, it is not the definition here that we're talking about hidden assets and buried treasure does not mean that your soon-to-be ex is absolutely hiding something. So we don't, again, the positive me is not going to say every single case and every single client is going to have this huge case of anxiety trying to find out if their soon-to-be ex has all of this behind the doors. You know, the closed doors doesn't always lead to hidden assets and buried treasure. So don't get that wrong idea today. Okay. For everyone listening, that's the disclaimer.
Well, and it's a good one because I did also, right after your episode on the standard of living, I had financial expert and forensic CPA on, Tracy Cohen, and we talked about the red flags of financial infidelity and fraud. And that's not necessarily what we're talking about here today. And that's why I said in the beginning, we're uncovering the buried treasure of hidden assets, yes, maybe, but also forgotten assets or things that you didn't even think of as assets of the marriage. And that's why I think this is such I'm going to put it in air quotes, valuable episode because we're going to talk about things that you or your spouse may not have ever even considered or things that you need to put a dollar sign on and share or divide between the two of you.
Exactly. I love that. That's beautifully said.
Yeah. So let's just start with some of the categories of you call them easily forgotten assets, because there are some, real bell ringers in here for me.
There is. And so let's start, so we're finding buried treasure today. So we're going to go with you and I are on a boat with the listeners. Okay. So we're on a boat. It's a beautiful yacht. And we're just looking over the water and we're just going to kind of like search around for this buried treasure. And usually it does start within the home. So maybe we're in an airplane looking down at the house. I don't know. I like the boat example, but
I like the yacht. Let's call it the yacht.
Yeah. I'm into sailing, so it would be a beautiful sailboat. But okay. So this buried treasure, a lot of the places that we forget to look, so easily missed, is really starting right in front of you. So honestly, the best thing that you can do if you're about to go through a divorce is just take photos around the house. So if we're there on the yacht, we're watching, like looking around, okay, we're going to go right under the surface. That's right under the surface. We want to go looking around the house, take photos, because that will not only jog your memory of what you have, but also easily missed is some of these things might be inheritance. Like you might have some antiques, you might have some paintings, things might go missing in the future that now you have a record of during the divorce process. So just easily missed, it will also jog your memory to look at some of these items. For example, a big one of my clients is wine and storage cellars and places that aren't even in the house. So actually having, storage somewhere else that's housing the wine, you need to know these things and take photos of it. I don't, do you have any clients that you've ever experienced that has a good story about wine?
Yeah, actually the wine just for me is a big one because not that long ago, I had clients who had a wine collection that was literally in the tens of thousands of dollars. And it was not something, frankly, even with as many years as I've been in this industry, it was not an asset that I thought of asking them about. They brought it up, right? And that's what I think is important is so many people have things, either just, items in their home. You mentioned antiques. We've talked about wine. I had a client who had a bourbon collection. There are things that you have and take for granted that you might not be considering as marital assets.
Another one that, you might remember you have, but you haven't looked in for a while is a safe. Yeah. I know that sounds ridiculous. Like, okay, yeah, everyone might have a safe somewhere, but you want to look through that, take photos of it, know what's in there. And it is in your house that you might forget. That is one that I see all the time. And I do have some stories of there's been missing money in it during the divorce process. So if you can protect yourself and know what's there, that's easily missed. And that is an asset in a marital divorce. You want to make sure you're prepared and you know what's there. And that goes into, maybe this is, if we're in the yacht, this is maybe really far out there that we're looking with a telescope and you see something out there, is like a little thing that some people have still, some people don't, is a safe deposit box.
Yes.
That's also very easily forgotten, especially if it was something that you opened with your ex or soon to be ex years and years ago. Make sure you know if it's still open. You go to the bank. I mean, I've been in banking. I can't tell you the amount of stuff that people forget is in safe deposit boxes. So in a divorce, make sure you know that your name is on it as well. If you're not an owner, I don't care if you're married or not. If you are not an owner, they will not let you access it. Yeah. So make sure you know if you have access, take photos again. And Susan, this goes into something that we'll touch, I'm sure, later on, but let me just throw it out there now. Don't hide assets. Don't, I know we're talking about the easily missed portion of this right now, but don't play stupid. Don't play ignorant. Know what you have in that house. So right now we're still on that surface of the water right underneath. We'll go deeper in a few minutes, but I just want to point that out as well.
Yeah. Well, and a couple of things you're so right with that. And a couple of things that you just said, I want to sort of follow up on. One, cash, because cash is something that obviously is an asset, but it is something that gets lost in the mix often. I had a case where it was just one of the parties' norm that she kept cash stashes. She worked in a business where she received cash. And so she kept little cash stashes all around the house, in pockets in her closet. Like she'd have hanging things, literally under the mattress, things like that. So one of the things that my client did, the husband, I represented the husband in that case, he had actually gone around the house, lifted up the mattress, took a picture, spread it out and then tallied it all, and didn't take it, didn't do anything with it. But down the road, when perhaps the wife was less than truthful about its existence, he had a pictorial and monetary where he had gone and actually taken pictures, which was very helpful to us because it did total a large amount of money.
Absolutely. Oh gosh, that's a great example. And there's quite a few of those of cash. So that's something to be aware of. Easily missed, just cash in general. So yeah, looking for that. And we could go into all the different accounts that you could be trying to find this in. But again, we want to point out not everyone is hiding and you're not going to miss everything, but just pointing these things out is, yeah, cash is a huge one, especially if, let's go into this right now, the business aspect of if your soon-to-be ex has a business, there could be a lot of easily missed assets there. And that goes into one that a lot of people forget about. So this is something right under the surface of the water, is always looking for vacation pay and sick pay in that company. If he or she is working for another company, is there unused credits? That's part of you getting access to that as well, because that could be paid out in a certain amount of assets or something else. You might be creative with your divorce on how you get compensated for that. But unused sick pay, unused vacation pay, that's also something that is easily missed. People don't think it's theirs if they're not the one working for the company.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Well, how about health savings accounts? Those usually have a couple $1,000s in there that is available for the family's use.
HSA, health savings accounts. Yes, that absolutely. Especially if you have children, we want to make sure that we're looking at these and not forgetting about it, because that's going to impact them in the future. If you need to take them to the dentist, if they have to start getting braces, all of these things will impact you and your children. So making sure you don't forget.
Right. Well, and they go forward too, as long as that employee stays with that company each year, they're going to have a certain amount that they can set aside tax-free to go toward those expenses. So something to take, it's not buried treasure maybe, but it's future treasure maybe.
Exactly. And that to me is the same thing, is buried treasure, future treasure. We all want a dollar to equal the dollar in the future. And if you know about it, then you can actually have that checked on a list saying that that's an asset. So I love your forward thinking. That's what I love doing as a planner. So financial.
Think forward, think how we can take everything all together and put the puzzle pieces together to work for that family.
Exactly. And another piece of that puzzle, going back to the business owner or someone working for a company, you always want to make sure this could be an easily missed asset, or this could be more of a hidden asset, depending. But employer collusion of, I'm about to get divorced. Can you lower my salary? Oh yeah, Bob or Susan, you've been here for 25 years. We're going to help you both out, whoever it is. I'm just using these names. And we're going to lower your salary so it looks like you're not making enough to give spousal support. Or Cindy, let's not give you that bonus this year because we know that you're going through a divorce and we don't want your soon-to-be ex to have that portion, however much it is. And I've seen numbers that are huge. And for me, it's in the millions with clients that can be hidden or easily missed.
Deferred.
Yes, that's a great word.
I like that word, deferred. It's a good question to ask in either the deposition or in your mediation. Is there any deferred income? At least you're asking under oath or in a situation where you can expect some truthfulness.
You should expect truthfulness. I absolutely agree. Yes, we'll leave it at that. Yes.
Right. So before we dive into some of the hidden assets or things that you want to look at, I do want to just sort of touch on some more of these easily forgotten assets. And I do want to mention to everyone, you have actually given me a beautiful list for people that they can just go down and get a lot of these. And so we'll have a link in the show notes where people can download this link from Olivia. So just so that you know that it's there, I'll have more information at the end of the episode. But a couple of them that are in here really jump out at me because I have had all of these things come up. Frequent flyer miles, season tickets, country club prepaid or deposits. When you join a country club, often you have to give them $100,000, or I'm making up a number, right? But sometimes you get that back if you leave the country club. So it's not a one-time payment that's gone. And then hobby expenses or hobby assets. Like I have one guy who had a fully decked out, workspace. He did woodworking and it was just a hobby. He didn't make money at it. It wasn't a business for him, but the equipment that was in there was worth hundreds of thousands of dollars.
I think we can go back to all of these and go into examples of clients all day long. But that's, yeah, I like how we're going through the list, and we'll give this to everyone, so you don't need to memorize these. But yeah, the season tickets, I mean, if you have even memberships, I mean, yeah, you're saying 100,000, that's absolutely normal in the world. That even if it's 10,000, let's just say 10,000 to join some club or membership, and your soon-to-be ex is paying for that before the divorce is done. They know the divorce is happening, or they did it right before they filed, who knows. You want to know these things. That's easily missed. And going back to the frequent flyer and the airline miles, gift cards, I know that sounds silly, but that's a huge one as well. If you think about how much money you could be potentially missing out on if you have all this accumulated points, miles, cards that you're forgetting about, or even magazine subscriptions. You don't want to be spending $50, $100 a month. That might sound small, but it isn't. It adds up for things that aren't yours. If they're getting the benefit, you're not, whatever it may be. So looking for those, because that's forgotten. A lot of us don't remember even what's on our monthly auto pay, right? So be aware, look at it if you can.
Yes. Oh, and another one, I mean, in a situation where people are renting, very often people will forget there's a security deposit with their rental unit for almost all rental units. And so that will get lost in the mix. And then post dissolution, when somebody moves out, they'll be like, hey, wait a minute, they just got $4,000 back. And don't I get some of that? You might not, if it wasn't discussed during the divorce.
Exactly. And if you own a home, so we're going way deep in the water because this is a big asset. If you haven't ever been a part of any of the home discussion besides signing off and getting the home, and maybe you don't even know if there's a mortgage, what about the equity in the home? That's a huge, huge missed asset if no one's telling you about it. So we're telling you today, make sure you know if there's equity in your home, okay? Or multiple homes, whatever it may be, if you're not renting.
Yeah. I mean, that's a very important, because it's usually one of the biggest assets of a marriage, right? So it gets missed less often, but there, if you, something to be thinking about, if you borrowed the $100,000 down payment from your family, that's something to raise. It may not be a hidden asset but it may be a forgotten issue that needs to be discussed in the divorce.
Exactly. Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's get to I won't call it the fun stuff, because that is all fun. I mean, this is all fun if you're finding money. Who doesn't love that? But there are also areas where, like I mentioned, the lady who was a little less than truthful when we asked her if she had cash around the house, and she said, oh, maybe $100, I think was her response on her interrogatories, and it was actually tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, I believe.
Thank God he had those pictures. But let's dive into the hidden assets.
Okay.
So let's go there now. Keeping in mind, sometimes it's done intentionally, sometimes it's done not as intentionally.
Okay, so now we are literally at the dive site. So we got on our scuba gear, we're down in the ocean, down really far, and we are trying to find the buried treasure in this like hidden ship that we discovered together. Okay, all of us, the listener, you and I. And the biggest thing is nowadays there's a lot more opportunity to hide assets and have that buried treasure. But then the other flip side to that is there's a lot of opportunity to have the right people involved, or to be able to trace it with just the technology nowadays. So twofold, people can open accounts really easily online and hide assets just by opening an account and moving money. But then if you do your due diligence, or you have the right people involved who can look back for you, you can find a lot of these assets. So the first one I'll throw in there, because it's a new thing, the last 5 years, I haven't seen it before that, is cryptocurrency, crypto accounts. Those obviously are supposed to be more of the anonymous ways of looking at things and not having anyone track and look at, but you can still find those assets if you see where they're moving it out of the bank accounts. So it's still traceable. I use that in quotes because sometimes you need to hire a forensic or someone who is an expert in crypto, but that's something that you want to at least know. Has your soon to be ex been talking about, oh, I'm 200% up today, or I made money today on my crypto? Are they talking about crypto? They will talk about it. I promise you. So
Yeah.
you will know if you're married to that person, if they've dabbled in it at all. And that is something you want to bring up. That's hidden. That is opening the chest to the buried treasure, because that can be a huge amount. Even, yes, with right now, if someone's listening to this in 5 years or 3 years, it's still going to be a thing. Even if the market's down and the Bitcoin's down, doesn't matter. It's going to go up and down, fluctuate. You want to know where that's at and how much and what's going on, because that could have been your marital asset that they used to buy crypto.
Right. Well, and yes, I mean, crypto is going to be just like the stock market. I mean, it's going to go up, it's going to go down, it's going to ebb and flow, but bottom line, it's an asset. And one thing you just said is that people will talk about it. And this is really key about all assets. You probably know more, listener, than you think you do about what's out there. And so 2 things to look for is to think back on those conversations, like Olivia just said, but also a real, warning bell should go off when they stop talking about that stuff. Because I have had so many clients say to me, well, yeah, I remember like a few years ago, he or she was interested in crypto, but I don't think it ever went anywhere because they don't talk about that at all anymore. It's actually probably means they did go there, but people will stop sharing information on finances for a longer period of time at times than you might think when divorce or separation comes up on their radar.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I am so glad you brought that up. That is absolutely, it sounds counterintuitive that, oh, they all of a sudden stopped talking about it. So yeah, I believe that it's probably not a big deal anymore. They probably lost so much. It's not even an account. Absolutely agree with you. If they stop talking about it, most likely
start asking about it if they stop talking about it.
Yep. That's really well said. Really well said. Mm-hmm.
So, and that's a big one. So I'm glad we started with crypto, because it is something that I will even say to my colleagues out there. It is something that not enough professionals, at least in the divorce law space, our financial professionals like you tend to be up on it. And this is one good example of why it's good to have an experienced financial professional involved, because it's ever changing. Now we have NFTs and we have all this additional stuff that I couldn't even explain to you, but I know it's worth money.
Yes. And it is an uncomfortable new space. So you do want an expert that knows what they're talking about. And that goes into everything. So what we can talk about in another buried treasure is trust accounts or offshore accounts and all of these other things that you want the expert helping you with those. You're not going to be able to do it alone in a lot of ways. And I'm not saying that because you're not intelligent, listener. It's because I wouldn't even be able to know what the offshore account looks like and how to access it without getting the right trusted person involved. So even as a financial expert in divorce. So that's where you want to bring in experts, but it's good to know hidden assets can be found if you have the right people involved. But again, not everyone has hidden offshore accounts or trust accounts. It's very specific to, your situation best.
Yeah. Well, and that's another good point. You're raising something that I realized, when I was in, practice and I represented clients of, certain financial means, we would talk about where they routinely took vacations, because you would find that sometimes they'd be going off to the Cayman Islands, which perhaps might have favorable banking laws to someone who wants to create offshore accounts. And surprisingly, every time they were there, one of the, spouses would go off up for a day on their own. Well, it turns out he was depositing cash This was not a legal operation he was doing, by the way. It's not legal to travel with more than $9,999 in US currency in a briefcase, but he was doing that. And there was a very large offshore account in the Cayman Islands. We only found out about it through talking to my client about the fact that every year they took this one vacation there.
Wow.
So that's one extreme example, but
that's good.
Yeah. You never know where you're going. So, but it's also an example of where my client's spidey sense knew there was something going on.
Let's talk about that. So if you're listening right now, think about in your gut, when have you had that spidey sense? Your gut, your body, trust it. You know more than you think, especially if you've been married for a few years and you know this other person. Trust yourself. I can't fathom. It's just how many times I've heard people try to trust other people's knowledge base. Oh, you should be looking for this or that, but they're not trusting their own gut. So I'm really glad that you're listening to your clients and their spidey sense and you're going with it. So good. This is good. I
actually use that term spidey sense because clients are, it tells people. So that's not a legal term, folks. Didn't learn that in law school, but it does come up a lot, and clients I do find that do know more than they think they do. And one other thing, just if you're listening to this and you're not in a divorce situation, but you are not well versed in your household's finances, in your marital finances. So I hope some of what we're saying here is giving you the, an impetus to maybe want to have more information about your finances, not because maybe your spouse somewhere down the road is hiding them, but this is the type of information that so many people just don't have when it comes to the time to divorce, because they don't want to know, or they don't put the time into really understanding. And I know that's something you work with people all the time to, empower people around money.
Yes, because if you can stay married, 97% of us have money anxiety. Okay. I'm going to repeat that. 97% of us have money anxiety. If you have your head in the sand, okay, you're on the island, you're not even on the boat with us, you have the head in the sand, and you have such high anxiety about finances and you just want to ignore it. I hope today, if you are not even on the path of getting divorced, that you take your head out of the sand, you listen to these conversations, and it really helps open your heart to just having a conversation with your spouse. Because if you can understand the money situation in your household and have that, just let's make it really short, 10 minutes, 15-minute conversation once a month, maybe, then getting your head out of the sand will lower your anxiety, will make you feel closer to your spouse. And what's the biggest reason of divorce? In my mind, of course, I have a bias, but there's all these stats that say number one reason is money, finances, all of that. If you can avoid going down the path of having high anxiety and never knowing about the finances and then going and getting a divorce instead, like, why can't we maybe get your head out of the sand and talk about it a little bit here and there and never get divorced? That would be phenomenal.
Yeah, we're not pushing divorce here. Even we're divorce and beyond, or marriage and beyond. We're good with both.
Exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely. We can change that culture if we talk about it more often. So
these are conversations we should be able to have. And if you can't, that's telling you something as well. I'm looking at your list, and there's another item on here that I do want to talk about, because again, I have an interesting case around this, and I bet you do too, but the children's accounts is really one of those that is, people think it's so obvious. Well, yes, of course we have money set aside for the kids' education, or for the, the money that the kids have been getting as gifts, and I'm the custodian on it. So that's something I think people need to be more aware of as an asset as well.
Can I just mention what custodian means? Because I personally would not have any clue what that term means if I wasn't in finance. So if you want to open an account for your child and they have a social security number. So after, let's just say you have a 6-month-old baby, you have the social security number, you as one of the owners, parents of an account can be the custodian. Only one parent or owner to the account of a 529 or an educational plan or child's account, whatever you may want to call it today. But you are the custodian. So you're doing what's in the best interest for that child's account. You are custodying the assets under your name with their social. So one parent can be on one account. You can have multiple accounts. So that's something to watch for. But what you typically see is one of the parents who is really the financially savvy one will open the account, have it in the benefit of the child, open for the next account for the next child, and they're still the custodian for that account as well. So as the divorce starts, or hopefully before the divorce, and you never get a divorce, and you guys talk about the educational accounts in your marriage. But if you are in the divorce and you're talking about the 529 or the educational plans and the money, see if you are custodian. So if you are the owner, if you're not, you cannot call up that plan or that account, at a bank or wherever it may be, custodian wise. If you're not the custodian, you can't talk to them and ask them the balance, the balance, the account assets. You can't talk about it at all, even though it's your child.
Yeah.
So we have some tips on, what to do in that circumstance. But a lot of times what I would say is know the statements, know if you're custodian or the owner, and then have a conversation. Can you guys both be owners and split the assets? There's really no fee I've ever seen. And I've been in banking and in wealth management where I would open these all the time. There's really no fee for moving assets to another account, the same place. So you should be able to have yourself as an owner or change names so that you both have ownership on half of the assets. Just call the authority account wherever it's housed. Make sure that they're aware of what's happening, and they can help you with the forms and get the right names, and make sure you're a part of that situation too, because that is absolutely a buried treasure right there. Absolutely. Hundreds of thousands of dollars can be in each account for each child. So
and it's really a key factor. And here's another aspect to those. You're talking about 529s. This was a surprise to me many years ago when I was working with a fantastic financial professional, and this couple, education was really important to this couple. They had put a great deal of money aside in 529s for their children. And just for those who are listening, what a 529 allows you to do is put aside tax funds pre-tax for your children's educational benefits. And there are certain prescribed reasons why you can take money out. But one thing that I was surprised to find out, and then always made sure we talked about in every divorce after that, was that if the funds are not fully used for the purposes intended, and there's money in there at the end. So say you had $250,000 set aside for education, you spent $200,000 and there was $50,000 left, that belongs to the party who owns that account and not to the child. So that money actually went to the parent because the monies had not been expended, because that parent was the custodial parent and the monies had not, it didn't say in the agreement, it'll be any monies left over will either go to the child or will be split among the parents. That parent got all of those funds, kind of like a 401k.
Can I also state that,
Please.
and this is where it can get very finicky, and I do not want to put this energy out and say everyone does this, but it can happen, and it's easily doable, is changing the name of the beneficiary. So you could have one child's social on there, and let's say I'm the owner. I, as the custodian owner of that account, can decide, oh, I actually want to give it to my niece or nephew and just add their name instead of my child's name or whatever it may be. So in talking about divorce, you want to know whoever is the owner, they can change that beneficiary if they want to. They have the right to do that because it's the funds that they're putting in. Now, should they? No, not at all. Not at all, but they can.
They can. And, there are ways in your agreement to take care of that.
Yes,
and to
exactly.
close
Talk
those
to your
loopholes.
lawyer.
talk to your lawyer. But I do
lawyer.
want to just say to people that these are things, maybe you're not thinking of them as buried treasure or hidden assets. And maybe this is a good example of where no one intended for them to be hidden assets. You're like, hey, I gave you the 529 statements, but you need to also consider where you have these accounts set aside for the benefit of others, how decisions are going to be made about, taking the money out, what that can be used for. Does it need both of your signatures, even though the institution may not require that? There's a lot to talk about around there. So let's talk about a few other areas where we do see, a little, where would you say some other areas where people are actually maybe actively hiding assets?
Okay. Actively hiding is friends, family. I absolutely. So one story, it kind of goes with the ocean theme. I like this is the guy, and this is not a client of mine. This is just something I witnessed in real life, is this man owns an oyster and champagne bar. I decided to go there one evening, and you had to sign up online for a reservation because they shut down the whole bar. Just is very small and adorable, but they shut it down just for the party because of COVID. And so you pay online beforehand, but it was very strange because when I was paying for getting this experience on a Friday night, it was a third party, PayPal or Venmo or whatever it may be. It didn't say the Oyster Bar and Champagne Bar's name. So kind of thought about it. Okay, I'm still going to go. It sounds weird that it's going to a third party, that the person I don't know, it's a female name, but seems reputable. Let's go. So me and the party go to this Oyster and Champagne Bar. We have a great time. And of course, I am talking about what I do, and he is very open about how he is literally having his funds from when people register and for the event for going to the champagne bar. All those funds are going to his friend so that his soon to be ex, who he's been fighting with for years in a divorce, doesn't see the assets that he's making in the Oyster Bar that he owns. And so that is a huge example. And of course, there's other parts of that story that I did not just let it end right there, because that's not okay with me.
Fraud, by the way, people. It's called fraud.
Yeah. Yes. And there's other things in there too. But so don't do that. But he was giving his friend the money and then also taking photos of his place being empty so that she wouldn't see that there's people in it. It's just, we don't want to work with these people, do we? No, but there's people out there that do these kind of things, and they will give their friend the money and then their friend will pay them back. And that's a business kind of example, but it happens all the time with friends and family as well, just in personal, hey, I'm going to give you this loan. And then once the divorce is over, I'm going to take back that $550, whatever $1,000 it may be. It could even be $500. I don't care. That's definitely hiding assets, and that's buried treasure. That's yours as well. That should be part of the divorce discussion.
It should be. And, I have one of my own cautionary tales that this story reminded me of. I had a client going through a divorce who had a family member pass away during the divorce. She was to receive, I think it was $80,000 inheritance. She had it sent to her son, her adult son, didn't tell me about it. Her attorney didn't tell her soon to be ex-spouse about it. Son and father were estranged. So, divorce was finalized. It was never mentioned. Well, lo and behold, about a year and a half later, dad and son got on better terms. Son tells dad files a motion to open the judgment on fraud. The judge agrees, gives him the entire asset, the entire $80,000, which he probably would not have been entitled to any of since it was an inheritance, and referred the file to the state's attorney's office for prosecution for fraud. So I've always told clients that story since it happened, because you think you're being oh so smart. You think you're saving, money. One, if she had talked to me about it, I would have told her, disclose it. It's probably not subject to distribution. So it would have just been a non-starter. And instead she lost every penny of it. She didn't end up getting prosecuted, but it was not a good situation all the way around.
That happens often. And I love your terminology, you know, how you say that and distribution and all of that kind of beautiful terms. It's true. You know, you want to make sure you're being very, very upfront. And I understand though. So if someone's listening right now and they are terrified that they're not going to make it on their own post-divorce, I completely am there with you. I'm sitting in the room. We have our scuba tanks. We're like in the water together. Let's go with that. Like, I understand that you are terrified of losing money. So why wouldn't you just hide it or think about hiding it? I get those thoughts. It just never will work out in your benefit in the end. Just like the story you said, I have plenty of examples on that too. You just don't want to. It's gonna work out. You will be okay post-divorce financially. You just keep listening to things like this. So please don't hide assets. That never will work in your favor. And especially if you have children, if they find out you're doing that, that respect level, I mean, I've seen it even in my own life. You know, I've had parents be hiding assets and educational funds that were never actually getting to me. It doesn't work out in the end.
It doesn't. And the karma of it, you know, involving
Yes.
your family in this, and the fact, I don't care that it was her adult son. What she did was involve her child into something between she and his father. And it just wasn't right all the way around. And, you know, one thing I just want to mention to listeners is what I said about what I wish she had come to me with it. It happens all the time that people do not disclose certain assets because in their mind, they're separate property assets. Well, that's just mine. She's not, or he's not entitled to any of it. Anyway, why would I disclose it? You want to disclose those assets because then you are protected because they were disclosed and it was acknowledged that they were separate assets. If you don't disclose them, then your protection of them being declared separate is not there. So you're actually harming yourself in many of those cases. And flip side of that, if it is a marital asset, as Olivia is talking about here, as I'm talking about, you know, we can't, you know, this is a podcast of 40 minutes. We can't like go through every circumstance, but the reality is they're going to find it most likely. There's a paper trail or a trail. There are professionals who help people find these things. And you are only going to end up, you know, like my client who lost that entire inheritance. And by the way, you know, my respect and, you know, and representation, I couldn't be involved in that any further, and harmed her relationship with her son and her ex. And was it worth it? I don't think she thought so in the end.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Yeah, I mean, really. So, I mean, you have, as I said to everyone, go to the show notes, click on the download so that you can get Olivia's wonderful list of both easily forgotten assets, hidden assets. And then you've also added a list of people to talk to or to bring into your case to help you find your pirate mentor or your scuba instructor to go with our metaphor, who are going to help you find these. Because as you said, some of these things are not, you might go look under the mattress and find the cash, but not all of these things are things that you can find yourself, right?
Exactly. You want your master scuba diver, you want your yacht crew, you want your skipper, you want everyone around you if you can. So there's some things that you can do on your own that are on that worksheet too, just very easily. But then there's some things that you do want those people around you helping you through that water and getting to that hidden treasure.
Right. Well, and one of the things that even brought this episode about was you said how much you love doing this, right? That's how we had this conversation, like, oh, hidden assets. That's one of my favorites. So for those who would like to get in touch with you, learn more about you, Olivia, what's the best way to do that?
Well, I know that I'm so creative and my website is too. And it's just literally summerhillfirm.com. So just look around and there's some helpful resources there. And you can learn a little bit more about hidden assets as well.
You can also find Olivia's own podcast, which is the Wealthy Women's Podcast.
Mhm.
So to all my wealthy women out there, go and listen to it because it's a wealth of additional information. And whether, even if you're not a wealthy woman, you can find a lot of really helpful information there. So Olivia, and if you didn't get a chance, also go listen to Olivia in part 2 of the most memorable cases episodes from early August of this year, because Olivia had a great story there as well as her most memorable case. So Olivia, thank you so much for joining me again for this is going to be one of those episodes and downloads. I know people are going to want this list that you've created. It's gold, folks. Go get it. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.